The morning light of October 1844 crept through the grimy windows of the workshop on Calle de los Espejos, finding its way across bottles of mercury, sheets of polished silver, and the hunched shoulders of our daguerreotypist. At 42 years of age, his hands moved with the precision of a watchmaker, though what he crafted was something far more mysterious, moments stolen from time itself. You might wonder what drives a man to spend his days in darkness, breathing chemical vapors that turn his fingernails yellow and leave a metallic taste perpetually on his tongue. For our craftsman, it was neither art nor ambition, but the simple satisfaction of honest work done well. He'd learned the process 7 years prior in Paris from Daguerre himself, though he'd never mention this to clients unless absolutely necessary. Boasting, he believed, was for charlatans and politicians. The workshop occupied the ground floor of a narrow building, squeezed between a print shop and a milliner's establishment. The walls, once white, had taken on the amber patina of iodine fumes. Every surface bore the careful order of a methodical mind, boxes of plates arranged by size, bottles labeled in his cramped handwriting, polishing cloths folded with military precision. This was his kingdom, small though it might be. "Mercury is running low again," he muttered to himself, a habit developed during the 2 years since his wife had died of consumption. Speaking aloud made the workshop feel less empty, though he'd never admit to loneliness. The mercury was indeed running low, and at 3 reales per ounce, it would mean another week of watered soup and stale bread. Unless, of course, Senor Vargas finally paid for those wedding portraits from August. A sharp knock interrupted his calculations. Through the workshop door came Manuel, the errand boy from the Plaza Mayor, clutching an envelope sealed with red wax. The coat of arms pressed into the seal made our daguerreotypist's eyebrows rise. A rampant lion and castle, the mark of old nobility. "From the Mendoza estate," Manuel announced with the self-importance of a 12-year-old bearing noble correspondence. "The rider said it was most urgent. He's waiting at the tavern for your reply." The letter, written on paper so fine it felt like silk between his fingers, contained a summons rather than a request. Don Alfonso de Mendoza required his immediate services for a matter of utmost delicacy. A carriage would arrive at dawn tomorrow. Payment would be generous. The purpose was left carefully vague, though a single line near the end made everything clear. "Your discretion in matters of posthumous portraiture is well known to us." Posthumous portraiture? How strange that capturing the dead had become his most profitable specialty. It had started 3 years ago, when a banker's wife begged him to photograph her stillborn son. Word spread among the wealthy that he possessed a particular talent for arranging the deceased to appear merely sleeping, for finding angles that captured peace rather than decay. He never corrected their assumption that this required special artistic gifts. In truth, it only required a strong stomach and steady hands. "Tell the rider I accept," he instructed Manuel, pressing a copper coin into the boy's palm. As the child scampered off, our daguerreotypist returned to his morning preparations, though his mind had already begun its journey to the Mendoza estate. The rivalry with Lorenzo Castellanos weighed on his thoughts as he polished a new plate. Castellanos, who operated from a grand studio near the Royal Palace, had recently begun offering what he called theatrical daguerreotypes, portraits where painted backdrops and careful staging created illusions of grandeur. Just last week, he'd photographed the Minister of Finance appearing to shake hands with a painted Napoleon. Theatrical nonsense, our craftsman thought, though he couldn't deny the crowds it drew. Where Castellanos offered fantasy, our daguerreotypist promised truth. Or at least, that's what he told himself as he mixed his chemicals. But wasn't all photography a kind of lie? A single moment, pretending to represent a whole life? The thought unsettled him more than he cared to admit. By afternoon, he'd prepared his traveling kit, a portable dark box, plates wrapped in black velvet, bottles nested in straw. Each item had its place in the leather cases his wife had given him on their 10th anniversary. She'd understood his need for order, had even found it endearing. My methodical magician, she'd called him. Though there was nothing magical about what he did, just chemistry and light, cause and effect, as predictable as sunrise. The workshop grew cold as evening approached. October in Madrid could be cruel, and coal was another luxury he'd been rationing. He lit a single candle and settled at his desk to review his accounts. The Mendoza Commission would help, certainly, but posthumous portraits brought their own challenges. Families in grief could be unpredictable, demanding impossibilities. Make her look as she did at her wedding. Make him appear to smile. Make the child seem ready to wake. Tomorrow he would enter another house of mourning, would witness another family's attempt to deny death's victory. He would set up his equipment with professional detachment, would speak in the soft, measured tones he'd perfected for such occasions. He would create an image that would outlast all of them, the grieving parents, himself, perhaps even the grand estate itself. The candle flickered, casting dancing shadows across the bottles and boxes. Outside, Madrid prepared for night, shutters closing, taverns filling, watchmen beginning their rounds. Our daguerreotypist extinguished the flame and climbed the narrow stairs to his apartment above the workshop. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. Tonight, he would sleep the sleep of a man who knew his craft, even if he no longer knew its purpose. The carriage wheels found every rut in the road to the Mendoza estate, each jolt threatening to upset the carefully packed equipment, despite the straw and velvet cushioning. Our daguerreotypist gripped the leather cases tighter, watching the October countryside roll past through windows filmed with dust. The driver, a taciturn man with the permanent squint of someone who'd spent decades staring at horses' rumps, had offered only 3 words since dawn. The Mendoza business. 20 miles from Madrid, the landscape transformed from scrubland to cultivated fields, from poverty to prosperity. Olive groves stretched in neat rows, their silver-green leaves shimmering in the morning light. The estate itself appeared gradually. First the tower of its private chapel, then the terracotta expanse of the main house, built in the style of a previous century, when Spanish gold flowed like water from the Americas. The household stood assembled in the courtyard, a reception usually reserved for bishops or visiting nobility, certainly not for a tradesman from Calle de los Espejos. Don Alfonso de Mendoza stepped forward, and our craftsman saw immediately that grief had aged him beyond his 48 years. His eyes sat deep in their sockets, the skin beneath stained purple with sleeplessness. "You've come," he said simply, as if he doubted it until this moment. Beside him stood his wife, Doña Isabella, 31 years of age and beautiful in that fragile way that made men want to protect her from harsh winds. She wore deep mourning, the black silk dress making her pale skin appear almost translucent. Her fingers twisted a rosary, though her lips remained still. Behind them, slightly to the left, stood a woman in gray, severe dress, severe expression, brown hair pulled back so tightly it stretched the corners of her eyes. This would be Miss Catherine Blackwood, the English governess. "My condolences on your loss," our daguerreotypist offered, the words worn smooth from repetition. Don Alfonso nodded absently, already turning toward the house. "Esperanza is waiting," he said, and something in how he spoke his daughter's name, present tense, possessive, sent a peculiar chill through our craftsman's chest. The house swallowed them into its cool darkness. Portraits of stern ancestors watched from the walls, their eyes following the small procession through corridors that smelled of beeswax and old incense. The governess walked beside him, and he noticed her hands, ink-stained fingers, a small burn on her left thumb that looked recent, the kind you might get from handling hot glass or chemicals. "You were very devoted to the child," he ventured carefully. "Esperanza was exceptional," Miss Blackwood replied, her English accent coloring the Spanish words. "In 3 years, she learned more than most children grasp in 10. Latin, French, natural philosophy." Her voice caught slightly. "She particularly loved botany. We pressed flowers together." They climbed a marble staircase to the second floor. Through tall windows, our daguerreotypist glimpsed the estate's gardens, formal hedges attempting to impose order on the wild Spanish landscape. A metaphor for something, perhaps, though he was too practical a man to pursue such thoughts deeply. The child's room had been transformed into a shrine. Candles burned on every surface, their light competing with the morning sun streaming through white curtains. Flowers, roses, lilies, carnations, filled Chinese vases, their sweetness almost masking another smell, one our craftsman knew too well. There, on a bed dressed in white linen, lay Esperanza de Mendoza. 7 years old, 3 days dead. Someone had dressed her in what looked like a First Communion dress, white silk with seed pearls sewn along the collar. Her small hands had been folded over a prayer book, her dark hair arranged in ringlets around a face that might have been carved from alabaster. The preservation was remarkable. The cool October weather had been kind, and someone had clearly taken great care with preparation. "We've kept the room cold," Don Alfonso explained unnecessarily. "The doctor said—" He stopped, unable to continue. Doña Isabella touched his arm gently, but he shrugged away from her comfort. Our daguerreotypist moved into his professional rhythm, the familiar actions providing distance from the raw grief filling the room. "I'll need to arrange the lighting," he said, already calculating angles. "The morning sun is good, but I'll need to control it." He began unpacking his equipment, each piece emerging from its velvet nest with practiced efficiency. The governess watched with unusual intensity as he assembled the camera obscura. "You studied in Paris," she said, a statement, not a question. When he looked at her sharply, she added, "The way you handle the equipment, French techniques are quite distinct from the English methods." "You seem knowledgeable about photography, Miss Blackwood." "My father had interests in natural philosophy," she replied carefully, "before I came to Spain. The preparation took 2 hours. Our craftsman positioned screens to soften the harsh morning light, arranged mirrors to eliminate shadows that might make the child appear sunken or hollow. The family watched every adjustment with desperate attention, as if the perfect photograph might somehow restore what fever had stolen. When finally ready, he made his final adjustments to the child's position. The head needed to be turned slightly to catch the light properly. The hands required repositioning to appear more natural. As he gently lifted one small arm, he noticed the governess step forward, then catch herself. Perhaps, she suggested, if her head were tilted just slightly more to the left. She often held it that way when reading. It was while adjusting the child's face that our daguerreotypist noticed something odd. The eyes, which should have begun to sink by now, appeared almost normal behind the closed lids. He'd seen enough death to know this was unusual. When his fingers accidentally brushed the child's cheek, he found the skin had been treated with something, glycerin perhaps, or some other preservative. "Now," he announced, positioning himself behind the camera, "complete stillness, please." The exposure would take 12 minutes. During that eternity, nothing must move. The family stood frozen, barely breathing, as if their stillness might transfer somehow to the image being burned into the silver plate. Don Alfonso's lips moved in silent prayer. Doña Isabella's rosary beads clicked softly, despite her efforts at stillness. The governess stood with her hands clasped, her gray dress making her appear like a standing stone in the candlelit room. Our craftsman counted the seconds in his head, a habit that kept his hands from trembling during long exposures. At 643 seconds, a cloud passed over the sun. He compensated by removing the lens cap for an additional 30 seconds. At 720, he ended the exposure. "It's done," he announced, and the room exhaled collectively. Now would come the development, the moment of truth or failure. As he packed the exposed plate in its light-proof holder, he noticed the governess whisper something to Don Alfonso, her hand briefly touching his sleeve. The gesture was bold for a servant, but grief had apparently dissolved certain boundaries. "I'll need a dark room for development," our craftsman said, "somewhere without windows." "The wine cellar," Doña Isabella suggested, speaking for almost the first time. "It's quite dark and cool." As servants helped carry his equipment downstairs, our daguerreotypist caught a glimpse of the governess returning to the child's room alone. Through the doorway, he saw her bend over the small form, adjusting something near the face. Then the door closed, and he was left to wonder what final adjustment she'd felt necessary to make. The wine cellar stretched beneath the estate like a catacomb, its vaulted ceilings disappearing into darkness beyond the reach of the oil lamps. Our daguerreotypist worked by the light of a single candle filtered through red glass, the only illumination that wouldn't fog his plate. The temperature here remained constant, perfect for the delicate chemistry about to unfold. Servants had been forbidden entry, though he could hear footsteps pacing overhead, the family awaiting their miracle. He'd performed this ritual hundreds of times, yet his hands trembled slightly as he prepared the mercury bath. The liquid metal pooled in its shallow tray, its surface mirror smooth, reflecting the red-tinted flame. The exposed plate rested in its holder above the mercury, waiting. Soon the vapor would rise, would cling to the silver particles touched by light, would reveal what the camera had seen. The process couldn't be rushed. Mercury vapor needed precisely 45 degrees of heat, no more, no less. Too cool, and the image would emerge weak, ghost-like. Too hot, and it would burn away entirely. Our craftsman adjusted the spirit lamp beneath the tray, watching his thermometer with the intensity of an alchemist seeking gold. As he waited, he became aware of another presence. A young housemaid had crept down the cellar stairs, carrying a tray with wine and bread. "Doña Isabella thought you might need refreshment," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. This was Rosario, 19 years old, with the kind of beauty that bloomed early in Spanish women. Dark eyes, olive skin, black hair escaping from beneath her cap. "You're brave to come down here alone," he observed, accepting the wine gratefully. "The others are afraid," she admitted. "They say you're capturing the little angel's soul." She crossed herself quickly. "But I don't believe in such nonsense. My cousin in Segovia had her portrait made last year. Her soul remained quite intact." There was intelligence in her eyes, a sharpness that her station required her to hide. Our daguerreotypist found himself warming to her practical nature. "Tell me," he asked carefully, "what do the servants say about the child's death?" Rosario glanced toward the stairs, then stepped closer. "The fever came quickly. 3 days from first complaint to—" She trailed off. "The English governess never left her side, wouldn't even let the nurse tend to her, said she knew special treatments from her father." "Her father? An apothecary, or so she claims, in London. She knows about herbs and tinctures, makes her own remedies for the Doña's headaches." The mercury had reached temperature. Our craftsman positioned the plate above the vapors and watched as the image began to materialize, emerging from silver nothing like a memory recovering itself. First, the white dress, then the small hands, the face peaceful in its stillness. But as the features sharpened, something unprecedented occurred. The eyes appeared to be open, not partially, as sometimes happened when muscle relaxation caused the lids to part slightly. These eyes looked fully, consciously open, the pupils dark and distinct, appearing to gaze directly at whoever would view the photograph. The effect was so startling that our daguerreotypist nearly dropped the plate. "Mother of God," Rosario breathed, crossing herself repeatedly. "She lives." "No," he said quickly, though his own pulse raced. "It's some kind of anomaly, a chemical reaction, perhaps." But even as he spoke, he couldn't explain what he was seeing. In all his experience with posthumous photography, nothing like this had occurred. "I must fetch Don Alfonso," Rosario said, already backing toward the stairs. "Wait!" But she was gone, her footsteps echoing up the stone steps. Alone with the impossible image, our craftsman examined it under his magnifying lens. The eyes were perfect, too perfect. The pupils appeared dilated despite the bright morning light that had filled the room. The irises showed detail that shouldn't have been possible to capture. Something had been done to those eyes. But what? Within minutes, the cellar filled with people. Don Alfonso arrived first, followed by his wife, the governess, and what seemed like half the household. Father Miguel had been summoned from the village church, his cassock rustling as he descended into the cellar's darkness. "Let me see," Don Alfonso demanded, his voice hoarse with emotion. Our daguerreotypist reluctantly handed over the plate. The effect on the grieving father was immediate and devastating. He fell to his knees, clutching the image to his chest. "She sees me. My little angel sees me." Doña Isabella stood frozen, one hand at her throat. The governess moved to comfort Don Alfonso, kneeling beside him, whispering something in English that sounded like a prayer. Father Miguel took the plate gently, examining it in the lamplight. The priest was 55, with the shrewd eyes of a man who'd heard too many confessions to believe in simple miracles. "Extraordinary," Father Miguel murmured. "In 30 years of ministry, I've never—" He turned to our daguerreotypist. "You did nothing unusual in the preparation?" "Nothing, Father." "Standard exposure, standard development." The priest's eyes narrowed slightly, but before he could speak further, Don Alfonso rose to his feet. "It's a sign," he declared. "Esperanza was too pure for this world. God has marked her as blessed." He turned to the governess. You said she spoke of angels in her final hours. Miss Blackwood nodded slowly. She said they were calling to her. She seemed to see something we couldn't. Our craftsman wanted to protest, to explain that photography was science, not sorcery. But the words died in his throat as he watched the family's transformation. The crushing grief that had filled the house began to lift, replaced by something that looked almost like joy. Who was he to destroy that? Father Miguel pulled him aside as the family clustered around the image. "You're certain of your process?" the priest asked quietly. "Absolutely certain, Father." "Then we must consider carefully how to proceed." If word of this spreads, and it will, the implications could be significant. The bishop must be informed. Rome might need to investigate. The cellar had become stifling with so many bodies pressed into the space. Our daguerreotypist retreated to a corner, watching the scene unfold with growing unease. He thought of the governess's knowledge of chemistry, of her father the apothecary, of those stained fingers that spoke of handling substances beyond ink. Belladonna. The word came unbidden. The word came unbidden to his mind. Deadly nightshade, which dilated pupils and had strange interactions with silver compounds. But surely no one would... "You must make copies," Don Alfonso was saying. "Multiple copies. This image must be preserved, shared. The world must know of this miracle." Our craftsman nodded mechanically, though his mind raced through chemical possibilities. The original plate could be used to create positive copies on paper treated with salt and silver. But would the copies show the same effect? And more importantly, should they? As the family filed back upstairs, chattering excitedly about providence and sainthood, Rosario lingered. "You don't believe it's a miracle," she said. It wasn't a question. "I believe in what I can measure and mix and prove," he replied carefully. She moved closer, close enough that he could smell the lavender water she used. "The governess was alone with the body for an hour before you arrived. She said she was praying, but..." Rosario bit her lip. "I saw her carrying bottles from her room. Small brown bottles like the doctor uses." "You're suggesting she tampered with the child?" "I'm suggesting nothing, Signor. I'm only a housemaid who sees things." She turned to go, then paused. "But if I were a clever woman who loved my master and wanted to ease his suffering, who knew that a miracle would bind him to me forever through gratitude..." She shrugged eloquently and disappeared up the stairs. Our daguerreotypist remained in the cellar, staring at the spot where the impossible image had materialized from vapor and light. Above him, he could hear celebration beginning, voices raised in prayer and wonder, footsteps hurrying to spread the news. By tomorrow, the entire district would know. By week's end, perhaps all of Madrid. He thought of his workshop, of his simple life measuring chemicals and capturing truth. That life suddenly seemed very far away. He'd come here to document death, and had instead created something that would live far longer than any of them. A lie, perhaps, or a miracle, or something suspended between the two, like an image waiting to emerge from silver and shadow. 3 days had transformed the Mendoza estate into something unrecognizable. Where once manicured gardens had stretched in solitary grandeur, now makeshift camps sprouted like mushrooms after rain. Pilgrims arrived hourly, some walking from distant villages, others in carriages bearing the crests of noble houses. Our daguerreotypist watched from his assigned room on the 2nd floor, counting the faces below. 73 this morning alone. Don Alfonso had insisted he remain to create copies of the miraculous image. A workshop had been hastily assembled in what was once a music room, its grand piano pushed against the wall to make space for chemical baths and drying racks. The acoustics, designed for Schubert and Mozart, now echoed with the drip of silver nitrate solutions and the scratch of his measuring tools. The transformation of the household proved even more dramatic than that of the grounds. Don Alfonso, who'd barely spoken above a whisper since his daughter's death, now held court in the main salon, recounting to anyone who'd listen the moment of revelation. His voice had taken on the fervor of a mystic, his eyes burning with purpose that looked almost like fever. 23 copies so far, our craftsman muttered to himself, adjusting the focusing glass on his copying apparatus. Each reproduction maintained that unsettling effect, the eyes that seemed to follow the viewer to see into their soul. He'd tested his belladonna theory privately, dropping the substance onto an unexposed plate and watching how it reacted with silver. The results were suggestive but not conclusive. A knock interrupted his work. Miss Blackwood entered without waiting for permission, carrying a tea service on a silver tray. She'd changed since that first day, her severe gray dress replaced with black silk that suggested mourning but whispered of something else. Her hair, while still pulled back, now allowed a few carefully chosen strands to frame her face. Don Alfonso asks for 10 more copies by evening, she announced, setting down the tray with practiced grace. The Bishop of Toledo has requested one, as has the Duchess of Medina Sidonia. The child becomes more famous in death than she ever was in life, our craftsman observed, perhaps more sharply than intended. The governess's eyes flashed, but her voice remained level. Esperanza's light was always destined to shine beyond these walls. Some of us recognized that even when she lived. She moved around his makeshift laboratory with surprising familiarity, identifying chemicals by smell, handling glass plates with the confidence of someone who'd done so before. Your supplies of silver nitrate are running low, she noted. Shall I have more ordered from Madrid? You seem quite knowledgeable about photographic chemistry, Miss Blackwood. My father believed in practical education, she replied, examining one of the completed copies. Even for daughters. Especially for daughters, who would need to make their own way in the world. Through the window came the sound of singing, pilgrims raising their voices in Ave Maria. The governess moved to look out, her profile sharp against the afternoon light. They bring such hope with them, she said softly. Who could wish to destroy that? Someone who values truth, perhaps. She turned to study him with those intelligent eyes. Truth is a luxury for those who can afford it, Signor. The rest of us must make do with what comfort we can manufacture. Before he could respond, commotion erupted in the courtyard below. A magnificent carriage had arrived, bearing the royal arms. Servants scrambled to form a receiving line as a figure emerged, not the queen herself, but someone from her household, judging by the elaborate uniform. Heaven preserve us, Miss Blackwood breathed, if the palace takes interest. She didn't finish the thought, but our craftsman understood. Royal attention would transform a local curiosity into a national phenomenon. They watched as Don Alfonso himself hurried out to greet the royal emissary, bowing so low his back must have ached. Doña Isabella followed, her pale beauty enhanced by the black silk of mourning. Even from this distance, our craftsman could see how she held herself apart, as if the miracle that had energized her husband had only deepened her isolation. "The Doña doesn't share her husband's enthusiasm," he observed. "She lost a stepdaughter she barely knew," Miss Blackwood replied carefully. "Esperanza was already 2 when Doña Isabella married Don Alfonso. The child never quite accepted her." "But she accepted you readily enough." "I was hired to educate, not to mother. Children understand such distinctions." She paused, her fingers tracing the edge of a glass plate. "Esperanza needed someone who could match her intelligence, challenge her mind." "I gave her that." The royal emissary was being led inside now, presumably to view the original daguerreotype. Our craftsman returned to his work, but remained aware of the governess's presence, the way she moved through his space as if mapping it for future reference. "There's talk of building a shrine," she said suddenly. "Don Alfonso wants to commission a chapel where the image can be permanently displayed. Father Miguel has written to his superiors about beginning proceedings for beatification." "Beatification requires miracles, verified miracles." "What is verification but consensus among those with authority to declare it so?" She picked up one of the completed copies, holding it to the light. "Already 3 people claim to have been healed by praying before the image. A woman with dropsy, a child with fever, an old man with failing sight. The power of suggestion is remarkable. As remarkable as a dead child whose eyes open only in silver and light." She set down the plate carefully. "Tell me, Signor, in all your experience with death and daguerreotypes, have you ever seen anything similar?" He wanted to lie, to claim he'd witnessed dozens such anomalies, but something in her steady gaze demanded honesty. "Never," he admitted. "Not once." "Then perhaps," she said, moving toward the door, "we should accept that there are more things in heaven and earth than our chemistry can explain." She paused at the threshold. "Though I suspect a man of science like yourself has already considered every possible explanation, including the most obvious one." After she left, our craftsman stood motionless for a long moment, her words hanging in the air like incense. The most obvious explanation. She knew that he knew. It was almost an invitation to confrontation, or perhaps a warning to remain silent. Outside, the pilgrims continued their songs. Someone had brought a guitar, and the religious hymns now mixed with folk melodies, the sacred and profane intertwining as they always did in Spain. He thought of his quiet workshop in Madrid, where the only mysteries were technical ones with chemical solutions. A young priest appeared in the doorway, Father Miguel's secretary, bearing a leather portfolio. "His Excellency requests copies for the Episcopal Archive," he announced. "Also, Father Miguel wishes to speak with you privately this evening, after Vespers." Our craftsman accepted the portfolio, noting the official seals. The church was moving quickly to claim this miracle as its own. Soon there would be investigations, theological committees, perhaps even representatives from Rome. And at the center of it all, a small girl with chemically dilated pupils staring eternally from her silver prison. He prepared another plate for copying, coating it with the albumin mixture that would receive the image. His hands performed the familiar motions, while his mind wandered through possibilities and implications. What had Miss Blackwood hoped to achieve? Simple job security? The gratitude of a wealthy employer? Or something deeper, a transformation of grief into purpose, despair into hope? The afternoon sun slanted through the windows, casting long shadows across his improvised laboratory. Soon, he would meet with Father Miguel, would have to decide how much of his suspicions to share. The priest was no fool. He'd surely considered earthly explanations for this supposed miracle. But would he want to hear them? The tavern stood at the crossroads between the estate and the village, a squat stone building that had served travelers since the days when Carlos V ruled half of Europe. Our daguerreotypist had walked here to escape the increasingly oppressive atmosphere of the Mendoza house, where every corner now held whispering pilgrims and provisional altars. The local wine was rough, but honest, and honesty had become a rare commodity these past days. Dr. Eduardo Fuentes found him there, nursing his second cup. The physician was 38, prematurely gray, with the permanently tired eyes of a man who'd seen too much suffering he couldn't prevent. He settled onto the bench with a groan that suggested his own bones knew their share of pain. "You're the photographer," the doctor said without preamble, "the one who captured the miracle." "I captured an image. Others declared it miraculous." The doctor smiled grimly, signaling the tavern keeper for wine. "A diplomat as well as an artist. Though I hear from my friend at the university that you're more scientist than artist, studied with the French masters." News travels quickly. Everything travels quickly now. The telegraph, the railway, and now these captured images that make the dead seem alive. He accepted his wine, studying its dark surface as if it might hold answers. "I attended the child, you know, through all 3 days of her fever." Our craftsman set down his cup carefully. "Scarlet fever, I was told. That's what I wrote on the certificate. The symptoms fit, mostly. The rash, the burning temperature, the delirium." He paused, rolling the pewter cup between his palms. "But there were anomalies, such as the progression was unusual. Most children either recover or decline steadily. Esperanza would improve, then suddenly worsen, as if..." He shook his head. "I sound like the old women who see poisoners in every shadow. You suspect foul play?" "I suspect nothing. I observe irregularities." The doctor drained half his wine in one swallow. "The governess, Miss Blackwood, she insisted on administering her own remedies alongside mine. Said they were traditional English treatments her father taught her. Did they help? The child died, so clearly not. But the governess was devoted, I'll grant that. Never left the bedside, even pushed the stepmother, away when she tried to tend the girl." Our daguerreotypist thought of Doña Isabella's distant manner, her separation from her husband's religious fervor. How did the Doña react to that? With relief, I think. She and the child never warmed to each other. 7-year-olds can be cruel in their rejection, and Esperanza was particularly strong-willed. The doctor signaled for more wine, though perhaps I shouldn't speak ill of the dead, especially the supposedly sainted dead. "You don't believe in the miracle?" "I believe in what I can examine and test. Speaking of which..." He reached into his medical bag and withdrew a small vial. "I kept this, though I'm not sure why. Some of the medicine the governess was giving the child. She said it was foxglove extract for the heart, but the color is wrong. The smell, too." Our craftsman took the vial, holding it to the fading light from the window. The liquid was darker than digitalis should be, with an oily consistency that clung to the glass. He unstoppered it carefully, waving the fumes toward his nose rather than sniffing directly, a chemist's habit that had saved him from more than one toxic surprise. Belladonna, mixed with something else, something to mask the bitter taste. His pulse quickened, but he kept his expression neutral. "Interesting. May I keep this?" "If you wish, though I'm not sure what you'd do with it." The doctor studied him shrewdly. "Unless you have suspicions of your own about our miracle." Before our craftsman could respond, the tavern door burst open. Rosario rushed in, her face flushed from running. She spotted them immediately, hurrying over despite the impropriety of a young woman entering such an establishment alone.
"Signor, you must return at once," she gasped. "There's been an incident. A pilgrim claims the photograph moved, that the child's hand lifted in blessing. Don Alfonso is beside himself with joy, and the crowd—"
She paused to catch her breath.
"They're saying it's a second miracle. Father Miguel has sent for the bishop himself."
The doctor and our craftsman exchanged glances. "Mass hysteria," the physician muttered. "I've seen it before. One person claims to see something, others convince themselves they see it too." They walked back together, the autumn evening settling around them like a shroud. The estate blazed with torches and lanterns, turning the approaching dusk into premature day. Hundreds of people knelt in the courtyard, their voices raised in the Magnificat. Someone had brought out the household's prized possession, a guitar that had supposedly belonged to Saint Teresa of Avila, and its notes threaded through the prayers like silver wire. Don Alfonso stood on the main steps, the original daguerreotype raised above his head like a monstrance at Corpus Christi. Tears streamed down his face as he called out, "See how she blesses us! See how heaven reaches through the veil!" Our craftsman searched the crowd for Miss Blackwood and found her standing in the shadow of a pillar, observing the scene with an expression he couldn't quite read. Satisfaction? Concern? When their eyes met across the courtyard, she inclined her head slightly, acknowledgement of something, though he wasn't sure what. "This is escalating beyond anyone's control," Dr. Fuentes said quietly. "Once the bishop arrives, once Rome gets involved." He didn't need to finish. They both understood how quickly local faith could transform into international spectacle. Inside the house, they found Doña Isabella in the small study, as far from the celebration as she could manage while remaining within the walls. She stood at the window, watching her husband's display with an expression of profound exhaustion. "My lady," the doctor began, but she raised a hand to silence him. "He hasn't been this alive since before Esperanza fell ill," she said softly. "How can I begrudge him whatever comfort this brings?" She turned from the window, and our craftsman saw that she'd been crying, even if it's all an illusion. "You don't believe in the miracle?" our craftsman asked carefully. "I believe my stepdaughter is dead. I believe my husband needs her to be more than dead for his sanity to survive. I believe—" she paused, choosing her words with care. "I believe Miss Blackwood understood this better than any of us." The admission hung in the air like incense. Before anyone could respond, a servant appeared to announce that Father Miguel required the photographer's presence immediately. The Episcopal delegation had arrived early, and they wanted to examine both the original image and the process by which it was created. As our craftsman followed the servant out, he heard Doña Isabella say to the doctor, "Tell me, Eduardo, in your medical opinion, can love become so desperate that it transforms into something else? Something that might be mistaken for devotion, but is actually closer to obsession?" The doctor's response was lost as our craftsman moved down the corridor, but the question lingered. In his pocket, the vial of mysterious medicine seemed to pulse with its own dark weight. Tomorrow he would test it properly, would confirm what his nose had already suggested. But tonight, he had to face the church's investigators, had to decide how much truth the world was ready to accept. The celebration outside had grown louder, more fervent. Through the windows, he could see pilgrims swaying in religious ecstasy, their faces turned toward the house as if it were the gates of paradise itself. Somewhere among them, a child was crying, not from sorrow, but from the overwhelming intensity of faith made manifest. Or at least, faith in something that photography and chemistry had conspired to create. The abandoned groundskeeper's cottage sat a quarter-mile from the main house, forgotten in the fever of religious enthusiasm that had overtaken the estate. Our daguerreotypist had discovered it while seeking solitude from the endless stream of pilgrims, and immediately recognized its potential. Stone walls, a single window facing north, and most importantly, complete privacy. Within 2 days, he'd transformed it into a makeshift laboratory. The morning sun barely penetrated the thick oak canopy surrounding the cottage as he arranged his apparatus on the rough wooden table. Glass beakers borrowed from the kitchen, a spirit lamp from his traveling kit, and, most crucially, fresh daguerreotype plates, prepared with his standard silver iodide coating. The vial Dr. Fuentes had given him sat beside an identical vial of pure belladonna extract he'd obtained from the village apothecary under the pretense of treating his own eye inflammation. Science required method, repetition, proof. He began with the pure belladonna, placing a single drop on a prepared plate and observing its interaction with the silver compounds. The liquid spread slowly, leaving a faint residue that seemed to alter the crystal structure of the surface. When he exposed this treated area to light and developed it with mercury vapor, the result was striking. The treated portion appeared darker, more receptive to the mercury amalgam. The mysterious medicine from the governess showed similar, but not identical properties. Mixed with the belladonna was something else. Laudanum, perhaps, or some other opiate to ease the child's suffering. But there was a third component he couldn't identify. Something that left an oily film on the glass and smelled faintly of bitter almonds. Prussic acid, he murmured to himself, recognizing the telltale scent. A deadly poison in sufficient quantities, but in minute doses, sometimes used to treat respiratory ailments. Combined with belladonna and opiates, it would create a powerful cocktail. But for what purpose? To heal or to harm? A rustling outside made him look up sharply. Through the small window, he glimpsed a gray dress disappearing behind an oak tree. He moved to the door, opened it casually, as if merely stepping out for air. Miss Blackwood emerged from behind the tree with studied nonchalance, carrying a basket of late autumn herbs. "Señor, what a pleasant surprise. I often gather medicinal plants here. The shade makes them particularly potent." She approached with that confident stride he'd come to recognize, her eyes taking in the cottage with its telltale wisps of chemical vapor escaping through the doorway. "An interesting location for a laboratory," she observed. "I needed space to work without disturbance. The house has become rather crowded." 300 pilgrims yesterday. Don Alfonso has commissioned architects to design a proper shrine. She set down her basket, fingering the leaves of a plant he recognized as wolfsbane. "You've been experimenting." It wasn't a question. He could smell the chemicals on himself, knew his fingernails had taken on the characteristic staining of silver nitrate. "I'm a man of science, Miss Blackwood. I seek to understand what I've captured. And what have you discovered?" He studied her face, searching for signs of guilt or fear. Instead, he found only that steady intelligence, perhaps tinged with something like sadness.
I've discovered that certain substances can create unusual effects when combined with photographic chemicals. She picked up a sprig of rosemary, crushing it between her fingers to release its scent. My father taught me that nature provides both poison and cure, often in the same plant. The dose, as Paracelsus said, makes the poison. She paused, then added quietly, or the miracle. You're suggesting miracles can be manufactured? I'm suggesting that God works through human hands, through knowledge, dedication, sacrifice. Her voice had taken on an intensity he hadn't heard before. Esperanza was dying. The fever was consuming her. In her delirium, she cried out about the angels, about the light that was calling her. Her father was being destroyed, watching his only child slip away. So you gave her your medicines. I gave her peace. The belladonna eased her visions, made them beautiful instead of terrifying. The laudanum took away the pain.
And the prussic acid? She looked directly at him. In tiny doses, it can slow breathing, make the body appear more peaceful after death. Combined with the cold October air, it preserved her long enough for you to capture her image perfectly. Our craftsman felt the ground shift beneath his feet. But the eyes in the photograph, the belladonna dilated her pupils before death. When you positioned her for the photograph, She hesitated for the first time. I placed a solution of silver nitrate mixed with more belladonna directly on her closed eyelids. I knew it would interact with your photographic plates. I'd read about similar chemical reactions in my father's journals. The confession hung between them like morning mist. Our craftsman found himself oddly unsurprised. Part of him had known from the moment he'd seen those impossible eyes staring from the silver plate. You planned it all. I planned to give a grieving father something to hold on to besides emptiness. I planned to transform meaningless death into purposeful miracle. Her voice grew fierce. Have you seen him these past days? He lives again. He has purpose, meaning, hope. Built on a lie, built on love. She stood straighter, defiant. I've been with this family 3 years. I taught Esperanza to read, to think, to question. I held her through nightmares, celebrated her small victories, watched her grow from baby to child. And yes, I loved her father, not romantically, don't give me that look, but with the devotion of someone who recognizes genuine goodness in a world that has precious little of it. From the direction of the house came the sound of singing. The pilgrims had begun their morning devotions. Miss Blackwood turned toward the sound, her expression softening. Listen to them. Farmers, merchants, nobles, all united in wonder. When has Spain seen such unity? When has faith brought anything but division and violence? This miracle, manufactured or not, has created only joy. Father Miguel suspects something. The bishop's investigators will be thorough. They'll find what they expect to find, an inexplicable phenomenon that confirms their faith. Do you really think the church wants to disprove a miracle that's bringing thousands back to devotion? She picked up her basket. Besides, who would believe that a mere governess could orchestrate such a thing? Women, as everyone knows, lack the intellectual capacity for complex chemistry. The irony in her voice was sharp enough to cut. Our craftsman thought of the bottles and beakers in his cottage, the experiments that proved her knowledge rivaled his own. You took a terrible risk. If anyone discovers what you did, they won't, because you won't tell them. She stated it with complete confidence. You're a good man, Senor. Too good to destroy the comfort this has brought. Too good to see me burned as a witch or poisoner, when all I did was use science to create hope. She was right, and they both knew it. He thought of Don Alfonso's transformation, of Doña Isabella finding peace in her husband's recovery, of the pilgrims whose faith had been renewed. What would truth accomplish, except destruction? The doctor has suspicions, he warned. Eduardo Fuentes is a rationalist who nonetheless understands that some truths serve no purpose. He'll keep his suspicions to himself. She moved toward the cottage door, then paused. You should know. I've told Don Alfonso that I must leave soon. My presence here is becoming inappropriate with so many visitors. I've requested a position with a family in Barcelona. Running away? Ensuring the miracle remains miraculous. Saints don't have governesses who linger too long, she smiled sadly. I'll miss Esperanza terribly. Despite what you might think, that part was never false. The chemistry was calculated, but the grief is real. After she left, our craftsman stood alone in his makeshift laboratory, surrounded by the evidence of his investigations. He could expose everything with a single report to Father Miguel: the chemical analysis, the confession, the methodology. Instead, he began carefully packing away his equipment. Some mysteries, he was learning, were meant to remain mysterious. The estate's library occupied the entire western wing's second floor, its shelves reaching toward a ceiling painted with scenes of scholarly saints. Thomas Aquinas disputing with heretics, Augustine writing his confessions. Our daguerreotypist had come here seeking respite from the crowds, only to find Miss Blackwood standing before a section dedicated to natural philosophy, running her fingers along leather spines as if greeting old friends. Paracelsus, Agricola, even a translation of Newton's Optics, she said without turning.
Don Alfonso's grandfather was quite the collector, though I doubt anyone's opened these volumes in decades, except for myself. The afternoon light streaming through tall windows caught the dust motes she'd disturbed, making them dance like tiny spirits. She pulled down a volume, opening it to reveal margin notes in a cramped hand. My father had this same edition. He'd annotate every book he read, arguing with the authors as if they could hear him across centuries. Tell me about him, our craftsman said, settling into one of the leather chairs. Your father. She closed the book carefully, holding it against her chest like armor. Thomas Blackwood, apothecary on Threadneedle Street, though he should have been teaching at Cambridge if birth and circumstance had been kinder. Her voice carried a mixture of pride and old bitterness. His father was a grocer who'd married above his station. My grandmother never let him forget it. An unusual man to educate his daughter in chemistry. He had no sons, only 3 daughters, and I was the eldest. When my mother died in childbirth with the 4th, another girl, he decided convention could hang itself. She returned the book to its place, selecting another. From age 8, I ground compounds, measured tinctures, learned to read Latin pharmaceutical texts. By 12, I was effectively running his shop while he conducted experiments in the back room. Our craftsman watched her hands as she spoke, those capable, stained fingers that had orchestrated a miracle. What happened to him? Cholera, in the outbreak of 32. He treated the poor in Bermondsey, wouldn't evacuate when the wealthy fled London, said his duty was to the sick, not his own safety. Her voice remained steady, but her knuckles whitened where she gripped the book. He died in 3 days. The shop went to his creditors. My sisters went to a cousin in Dover who ran a boarding house. I went into service.
From apothecary's daughter to governess. Quite a fall. Less of a fall than you might think. Impoverished gentlewomen have few options, and at least as a governess I could use my education. She moved along the shelves, her gray dress whispering against the floor. I spent 5 years with a Manchester merchant's family, teaching his daughters French and watercolors while secretly reading his son's science texts at night. Then a position with minor nobility in Kent, where the children were dull but the library was excellent. And then Spain? Spain was escape. She pulled out a Spanish translation of Linnaeus, examining its botanical plates. The family in Kent had a son who developed inconvenient feelings. The mother blamed me, naturally. Foreign governesses have that effect on impressionable young men, apparently. She dismissed me without reference. The injustice of it hung in the air between them. Our craftsmen knew the precarious position of governesses, neither family nor servant, educated but dependent, always one false accusation away from ruin. Don Alfonso's advertisement appeared in the Times at precisely the right moment, she continued. A widower with a young daughter seeking an English governess with knowledge of natural philosophy. The salary was generous, Spain was far from English gossip, and the child, her voice softened. Esperanza was extraordinary from our first meeting. 4 years old and already asking why the sky was blue, how birds flew, what made flowers grow. You loved her immediately. How could I not? She was everything I might have been with different circumstances, brilliant, curious, wealthy enough to pursue any interest. Miss Blackwood moved to the window, gazing out at the pilgrim still gathering below. I taught her everything my father taught me, and more. We dissected flowers, studied insects under magnifying lenses, conducted chemical experiments that made Doña Isabella faint with horror. And Don Alfonso encouraged it all. He'd lost his first wife to ignorance. She'd refused medical treatment, trusting instead to prayer and holy water. He wanted his daughter armed with knowledge. She turned from the window, and our craftsman saw tears. She quickly blinked away. He's a good man. Too good for this world, perhaps. When Esperanza fell ill, watching him fracture with grief was unbearable. So you decided to save him with a manufactured miracle. I decided to transform tragedy into purpose. Her chin lifted defiantly. My father taught me that knowledge unused is knowledge wasted. I knew chemistry, photography, human psychology. I knew that Catholics particularly respond to visual miracles, bleeding statues, appearing virgins, miraculous portraits. I knew that Don Alfonso needed something tangible to hold on to, something that proved his daughter's death had meaning. When did you decide? When did the plan form? She considered the question, absently straightening books on the shelf. The second night of her fever, when she began talking about angels. Don Alfonso was weeping, begging God for a sign that his daughter would be received in paradise. I thought, what if I could give him that sign? Not through divine intervention, but through applied science. You could have killed her with those chemicals. She was already dying. The fever had reached 40 degrees. Dr. Fuentes had privately told me she wouldn't last the night. Her voice cracked slightly. At least my medicines gave her peaceful visions instead of terrifying hallucinations. The belladonna made the angels beautiful. The laudanum took away the pain. And the prussic acid preserved her for the photograph, preserved her for eternity. Now she'll never decay, never be forgotten. She exists forever in that image, young and perfect and apparently blessed. Miss Blackwood pulled a handkerchief from her sleeve, dabbing her eyes with angry precision. "Don't you understand? This is the only immortality any of us can actually create, not through prayer, but through chemistry and light." Our craftsman rose from his chair, moving closer to her. This woman who'd risked everything, her position, her freedom, possibly her life, to create comfort from grief. "You know you can't stay here. Eventually someone will piece together what you've done. I've already made arrangements. A family in Barcelona needs a governess for their 3 daughters. I leave next week," she smiled bitterly. "From miracle worker to teaching irregular French verbs. Rather a come-down, but necessary." "Will you tell them, Don Alfonso and his wife?" "Tell them what? That their miracle is mere chemistry? That their saint is just a little girl whose governess knew enough science to manipulate death?" She shook her head firmly. "Truth isn't always kind, Senor. Sometimes the greatest love is letting people believe what they need to believe." Through the library windows, the sun was beginning its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. The pilgrims' evening prayers drifted up from below, 100 voices united in hope. Miss Blackwood stood silhouetted against the dying light, and our craftsman thought she looked like a figure from one of the theological paintings overhead, not a saint, but perhaps a martyred scientist, sacrificing truth for compassion. "I should pack," she said finally. "Doña Isabella has kindly given me several of Esperanza's books as remembrance. She says she can't bear to see them, knowing they'll never be read again." As she moved toward the door, our craftsman called after her, "Miss Blackwood, Catherine, what you did was extraordinary." "Wrong, perhaps. Dangerous, certainly. But extraordinary nonetheless." She paused at the threshold, not turning back. "My father would be appalled. He believed in absolute truth, in science as salvation. But he never had to watch a child die while their father went mad with grief. He never had to choose between honesty and mercy." Her shoulders straightened. "I chose mercy. I'll live with that choice, even if it damns me." The summons from Father Miguel arrived at dawn, delivered by his nervous secretary, who seemed afraid to meet our daguerreotypist's eyes. The priest would see him in the estate's chapel immediately, not a request, but a command barely disguised as courtesy. Our craftsman dressed carefully, aware that this might be the confrontation he'd been dreading, the moment when the church demanded answers he wasn't prepared to give. The chapel stood separate from the main house, a small jewel of Baroque architecture, built when Spanish gold flowed freely, and faith required gilded proof. Father Miguel knelt before the altar, his cassock pooling around him like spilled ink. He didn't turn when our craftsman entered, merely continued his prayers in Latin, the ancient words echoing off stone walls that had heard countless confessions over 2 centuries. Finally, the priest rose with the careful movements of a man whose knees protested such devotion. His face, when he turned, wore an expression of profound weariness. "Walk with me," he said simply, leading the way through a side door into the chapel's small garden. The morning air carried the scent of late roses and dying leaves. Father Miguel moved slowly among the graves of long-dead Mendozas, his fingers working a rosary with mechanical precision. "I've been a priest for 30 years, he began without preamble. "I've seen false miracles and genuine faith, manufactured relics and true grace. I've learned to distinguish between them." Our craftsman remained silent, matching the priest's measured pace. "The bishop's investigators have completed their preliminary examination. They're prepared to declare the photograph authentic. the phenomenon unexplained by natural causes. Father Miguel stopped beside a moss-covered headstone, tracing its weathered inscription. They're wrong, of course. The words hung between them like a blade waiting to fall. Our craftsman felt his pulse quicken, but kept his expression neutral. You doubt the miracle, Father? I doubt everything, my son. Doubt is the foundation of true faith. Without it, belief becomes mere superstition. The priest turned to face him directly. I also know that belladonna dilates pupils, that certain chemicals interact strangely with silver compounds, and that Miss Blackwood's father was an accomplished apothecary. The game was over then.
Our craftsman felt almost relieved. What will you do? Father Miguel smiled, an expression both sad and shrewd. What would you have me do? March into that house and tell Don Alfonso his miracle is mere chemistry? Announce to the 1,000 pilgrims camped on these grounds that they've been deceived? He shook his head slowly. I may be a priest, but I'm not cruel. You'd perpetuate a lie? I'd preserve a comfort. There's a difference. The priest resumed walking, leading them deeper into the garden. Tell me, what harm has this miracle caused? Don Alfonso has found peace instead of madness. Doña Isabella sees her husband restored. The poor of 3 provinces have received alms from grateful pilgrims. Even the local merchants prosper from the crowds. Built on deception, built on love. The governess loved that child, loved this family enough to risk everything. Father Miguel stopped again, this time beside a small fountain where water trickled over worn stone. I confronted her yesterday, privately. She neither confirmed nor denied, but her eyes told me everything. She's leaving, you know, has the wisdom to understand that miracle workers must disappear before they become too real. Our craftsman thought of Catherine Blackwood packing Esperanza's books, preparing for exile in Barcelona. She could be prosecuted. The Inquisition may be gone, but there are still laws against fraud, poisoning. What poisoning? The child died of fever, attended by a reputable physician. As for fraud, she's taken no money, claimed no credit. If anyone's profited, it's the church itself. Donations have increased tenfold since the miracle became known. A sound from the main house drew their attention, Rosario's voice calling for the photographer. She appeared at the garden gate, breathless and agitated. Senor, please, you must come. It's urgent. Not the miracle, it's personal. Father Miguel waved them away. Go. I have my own reconciliations to make with this situation. Our craftsman followed Rosario back toward the house, but she led him instead to the stables. There, hidden in an empty stall, she broke down sobbing. I'm with child, she whispered. 3 months gone. The father is Miguel, the stable master, not the priest. We love each other, but he's married. His wife is sickly, hasn't been right in the head for years. He can't leave her. The moral complexities seemed to multiply endlessly in this place. Our craftsman felt the weight of secrets accumulating like silver residue on his hands. What do you need from me? Money. Just enough to get to my cousin in Seville. She runs a boarding house, won't ask questions. She looked up at him with desperate eyes. I know you've been paid well for all those copies of the miracle. I'm not asking for charity. I'll find a way to repay you. He thought of his workshop in Madrid, his careful savings, his plans for new equipment. Then he thought of this girl, intelligent, practical, caught in circumstances beyond her control, just as Catherine Blackwood had been. I'll help you, he said quietly. No repayment necessary. But why? You barely know me.
because someone needs to break the chain of necessary lies with an unnecessary truth. He pulled out his purse, counting out enough pesetas for travel and several months' lodging. Take this. Leave tonight if you can. She clutched the money like a lifeline. The miracle. It's not real, is it? You and the governess. You created it somehow. Does it matter? Your faith, your prayers, those are real, regardless of what triggered them. Rosario considered this, then shook her head. I suppose not. Though it seems we're all pretending something here. The Doña pretends to mourn a stepdaughter she barely knew. Don Alfonso pretends his daughter is a saint rather than just a dead child. The governess pretends she's merely a servant when she loves the master.
Even you pretend you're just a tradesman when you're really, what? A philosopher? A keeper of secrets?
I'm a man who captures light and fixes it in silver. Everything else is interpretation. As Rosario hurried away to pack her few belongings, our craftsman stood alone in the stable, listening to horses shift in their stalls. Through the open door, he could see pilgrims gathering for noon prayers, their faith unmarred by the doubts plaguing those who knew too much. Perhaps that was the true miracle, not the photograph itself, but humanity's endless capacity to find meaning in ambiguity. Dr. Fuentes found him there an hour later, carrying his medical bag and wearing an expression of grim determination. I've made my decision, the doctor announced. I'm writing to the medical journal in Madrid about unusual presentations of scarlet fever. I won't mention the miracle or the estate, just the clinical symptom. Let other physicians draw their own conclusions. That seems fair. Fair? The doctor laughed bitterly. Nothing about this is fair. A child is dead, her father is deluded, and we're all complicit in the delusion. But you're right. Sometimes truth serves no purpose except destruction. They stood together in companionable silence, two rational men caught in an irrational situation. Finally, the doctor said, "The governess leaves tomorrow. Don Alfonso has given her a generous severance and a glowing reference. He seems to think she's too overwhelmed by the miracle to continue her duties. Perhaps she is, in her own way. Perhaps we all are." Dr. Fuentes adjusted his bag, preparing to leave. "I have patients to see, real ones, with problems that medicine can actually solve. Though after all this, I wonder if solving problems is really what people want from us. Maybe they just want us to transform their suffering into something bearable." The oak tree behind the chapel had stood for 300 years, its gnarled trunk wide enough to hide a man, its branches creating a natural amphitheater of shadow. Our daguerreotypist had come here seeking solitude before his departure tomorrow, only to find Catherine Blackwood already waiting, as if she'd known he would seek this particular refuge. "I leave at first light," she said without preamble. "The Barcelona coach departs from the village at dawn. I thought we should speak once more before." She gestured vaguely at the space between them, the words that remained unspoken. He settled against the tree trunk, studying her in the filtered afternoon light. She'd abandoned the severe gray dress for traveling clothes, practical brown wool that made her look younger, less formidable. "You're not concerned I'll expose everything?" "No, you're too much the philosopher for that. You understand that truth and goodness aren't always allies." She pulled a small leather journal from her pocket. "My father's last notebook. I want you to have it." The journal was worn smooth from handling, its pages filled with meticulous notes on chemical formulations, botanical observations, pharmaceutical preparations. Our craftsman recognized the precise hand of a trained scientist, saw where daughter had annotated father's work in different ink.
I can't accept this. You must. It contains the exact formula I used, the proportions of belladonna, laudanum, and prussic acid. Also the silver nitrate solution applied to the eyelids. She pressed it into his hands. Someone should know the truth, even if they never tell it. Before he could respond, footsteps approached through the fallen leaves. Doña Isabella appeared around the tree trunk, her black silk dress making her look like a beautiful specter.
She showed no surprise at finding them together, as if this too had been expected. "So the conspirators meet," she said, but without accusation. Her voice carried only exhaustion and something like relief. "Yes, I know. I've known since the moment I saw the photograph. Esperanza's eyes were hazel with gold flecks, very specific, very memorable. The eyes in the image are uniformly dark, pupil and iris merged. Only chemicals could cause that." Catherine stepped forward, protective instinct overriding caution. "My lady, You saved my husband's sanity and possibly my marriage." Doña Isabella moved closer, her perfume mixing with the autumn air. "I could never reach Esperanza. She saw me as the interloper who'd taken her mother's place. But Alfonso needed an heir, and She touched her stomach in an unconscious gesture. "I've failed in that duty for 5 years." Our craftsman understood suddenly. "You're with child." 3 months. "I haven't told Alfonso yet. I've miscarried twice before. But this time feels different. This time he's not consumed with grief, not seeing his first wife's ghost in every corner." She looked at Catherine with something approaching gratitude. "Your miracle gave him permission to let Esperanza go. She's a saint now, beyond reach, but also beyond loss." "I never intended," Catherine began. "Intentions matter less than outcomes," Doña Isabella interrupted. "You're leaving tomorrow?" "Yes, my lady." "Good. Miracles require distance. Stay, and you become too real, too questionable." The Doña pulled a silk purse from her sleeve, heavy with coin. "Your severance from my husband was generous, but not sufficient. This is from my personal funds, my dowry money, which is mine to dispense." Catherine shook her head. "I can't. What I did wasn't for money." "Which is precisely why you must take it. Mercenaries can be dismissed. True believers are dangerous." Doña Isabella pressed the purse into Catherine's hands. "Besides, you'll need resources in Barcelona. I've written to my cousin there. She knows all the best families. Will ensure you find a position worthy of your talents." The two women stood facing each other, understanding flowing between them like an electric current. Our craftsman felt suddenly superfluous, a witness to female complexity that exceeded his philosophical frameworks. "There's one more thing," Doña Isabella said, turning to include him. "The bishop will declare the miracle authenticated next week. There will be a ceremony, the beginning of the beatification process. The estate will become a pilgrimage site permanently. I need to know, is there anything that might emerge later? Any evidence that could destroy what you've built?" Our craftsman thought of the journal in his hands, the chemical experiments in the abandoned cottage, Dr. Fuentes' suspicions, Father Miguel's knowing silence. "Nothing that anyone would believe over a miracle," he said finally. "Science requires proof, but faith requires only conviction. The conviction here is absolute." "Then we three take this secret to our graves," Doña Isabella said firmly. "Agreed?" They nodded, conspirators bound by something stronger than oath, mutual understanding of a truth too dangerous to reveal. The Doña departed as suddenly as she'd arrived, leaving Catherine and our craftsman alone beneath the ancient oak. "She's stronger than she appears," Catherine observed. "The child will be lucky. If it lives, it will. She has purpose now, and purpose is its own kind of medicine." Catherine pulled her traveling cloak closer. "I should finish packing. The Barcelona coach won't wait for sentiment." But she didn't move, and neither did he. They stood in the gathering dusk, surrounded by the sounds of evening, pilgrims singing, bells calling to vespers, wind through dying leaves. Finally, Catherine spoke again, so quietly he had to lean closer to hear. "I loved her, you know, Esperanza. Not as a mother would, I'm not capable of that kind of blind devotion. But as a teacher loves a brilliant student, as a gardener loves a rare flower. She was extraordinary, and now she'll be remembered as extraordinary forever." Her voice caught slightly. "That's something, isn't it? To be remembered perfectly, rather than forgotten gradually." "It's everything," our craftsman agreed, thinking of his own wife's grave in Madrid, already weathering after just 2 years. "Memory is the only immortality we can verify." Catherine smiled then, the first genuine smile he'd seen from her. "A philosopher indeed. I'm glad it was you who came that day. Another photographer might have ruined everything with clumsiness or excessive honesty." "Or insufficient skill. The image had to be perfect for the illusion to work." "Not illusion," she corrected. "Transformation." "We transformed chemistry into comfort, death into purpose, grief into faith." She extended her hand and he shook it formally, professionally, as if they were merely business people concluding a transaction. As she walked away through the deepening shadows, our craftsman called after her one last time. "Catherine, what if there is a God? What if he judges us for this deception?" She paused without turning back. "Then I'll argue that we did his work better than he did. We brought hope from despair, unity from division, love from loss. If that damns me, I'll accept damnation gladly." She disappeared into the darkness, leaving our craftsman alone with the journal and the weight of shared secrets. Tomorrow she would board a coach for Barcelona. He would return to Madrid, and the miracle would remain, growing stronger with each retelling, each pilgrimage, each prayer offered before a photograph that showed impossible eyes. He opened the journal to a random page, finding a recipe for treating childhood fever. In the margin, Catherine had written, "Applied this to E during her final night. Seemed to ease her passing." Perhaps all medicine is ultimately about easing passages, from health to illness, from pain to peace, from life to death, from grief to acceptance. The chapel bells were calling the faithful to evening prayers. Our craftsman closed the journal and walked toward the house, where he would spend his last night among believers and doubters, all of them choosing their own version of truth. The letter arrived on a February morning when Madrid lay under a rare blanket of snow, transforming the familiar streets into something ethereal and strange. Our daguerreotypist recognized the elegant hand immediately, Doña Isabella's script, though the wax seal bore an unfamiliar device. He opened it in his workshop, surrounded by the comfortable chaos of his trade. bottles catching the winter light like captured fragments of rainbow. "The child was born yesterday," she wrote, "a son, healthy and strong. Alfonso has named him Esperanza's brother rather than replacement. The miracle, it seems, has taught him that love multiplies rather than divides. The estate has become all you might imagine, a shrine, a place of pilgrimage, a source of hope for thousands. Father Miguel has been elevated to Monsignor, reward for shepherding such obvious divine intervention. He bears his promotion with appropriate irony." Our craftsman set down the letter to attend to a customer, a young couple seeking portraits for their wedding. They chattered nervously about the expense, clearly having saved for months to afford this luxury. He found himself charging them half his usual rate, claiming a slow week, though his appointment book suggested otherwise. Since returning from the Mendoza estate, he'd developed an unfortunate habit of kindness that was playing havoc with his accounts. Later, alone again, he continued reading. Miss Blackwood writes from Barcelona that she thrives. 3 young pupils who challenge her intelligence, a library worthy of exploration, and, most surprisingly, a suitor. A widowed professor of natural philosophy who appreciates her unusual education. She suggests that perhaps miracles, like ripples in water, extend far beyond their point of origin. Through his workshop window, he could see Lorenzo Castellanos' studio across the plaza, still advertising theatrical daguerreotypes with painted backdrops and artificial grandeur. The rivalry that had once consumed our craftsmen now seemed quaint, like arguing over whether shadows were black or merely the absence of light. He'd learned the truth came in more shades than any photograph could capture. A knock interrupted his musings. Dr. Fuentes entered, shaking snow from his coat, carrying a medical journal from Paris. "Page 47, he said without preamble. "An article on anomalous daguerreotype effects in posthumous photography. The author theorizes that certain chemical combinations in the deceased can interact with silver compounds to create unusual optical effects." Our craftsman read the article, recognizing Catherine's precise formulations disguised in hypothetical language. She published it? Under a pseudonym, through intermediaries, but yes. Now, any future miracles of this type can be explained scientifically, if anyone cares to look. The doctor warmed his hands over the workshop's small stove. Brilliant, really. She's protected the Mendoza miracle by making it unrepeatable. Anyone attempting to duplicate it will be exposed as a fraud. They stood in comfortable silence, 2 rationalists who'd learned that reason had its limits. Finally, the doctor said, "I delivered a child yesterday." The mother was one of the pilgrims who'd prayed at the Mendoza shrine. She insists the miracle saved her baby, though I know perfectly well it was the forceps and 30 years of medical experience. "Did you correct her?" "Why would I? Her faith helped her endure 18 hours of labor. My forceps lasted 30 seconds. He pulled on his gloves, preparing to leave. I've learned something from all this. Truth isn't singular. It's a consensus we agree upon until a better consensus emerges. The Mendoza miracle is true because enough people need it to be true. After the doctor left, our craftsman returned to Doña Isabella's letter. There was a postscript he'd initially overlooked. Rosario writes from Seville. She gave birth to a daughter and has married a kind merchant who believes her widowhood story. She names you in her prayers, she says,
though she's no longer certain prayers reach anywhere except our own hearts.
Perhaps that's destination enough. The workshop had grown cold, the stove burning low. Our craftsman added coal, a luxury he could now afford thanks to the Mendoza Commission. But wealth, he'd discovered, was like truth, relative, subjective, less important than what you did with it. He'd sent money to Catherine in Barcelona, anonymously, knowing she'd need resources to establish herself properly. He'd paid for masses for Esperanza, not from faith, but from a sense of narrative completion. The final page of the letter contained unexpected news. Alfonso wishes to commission you again, not for a photograph this time, but to teach him the process. He says he wants to understand the miracle, to learn the science behind God's intervention. I haven't discouraged him. Knowledge, even partial knowledge, seems healthier than blind faith. Would you consider it? Our craftsman moved to his desk, pulling out paper for his response. But what could he write?
That he'd teach Don Alfonso everything except the one thing that mattered? That understanding the science would only deepen the mystery of why those particular chemicals had created that particular effect at that particular moment? Instead, he wrote simply, "I would be honored to share my knowledge, such as it is, though I should warn you that understanding how something works doesn't always explain why it works. Some mysteries survive explanation." As he sealed the letter, he thought about the nature of miracles. Every daguerreotype was miraculous, really, light becoming silver, becoming memory. Every chemical reaction that proceeded exactly as predicted was both utterly mundane and completely magical. Catherine had understood this, had used science to create wonder rather than destroy it. The snow had stopped falling, and afternoon sun broke through the clouds, setting the white city ablaze with reflected light. Our craftsman prepared his camera, deciding to capture this transformed Madrid before it melted back to ordinary stone and tile. He thought of Esperanza as he coated the plate with silver, a little girl he'd never known alive but would remember forever, her impossible eyes staring from a photograph that had become more real than reality. The exposure would take 8 minutes in this bright snow light. He removed the lens cap and began counting, as he always did, marking time with heartbeats and breath. Somewhere in Barcelona, Catherine was probably teaching her pupils about botanical classification. In Seville, Rosario was nursing her daughter. At the Mendoza estate, pilgrims were kneeling before a photograph that shouldn't exist, but did. At 480 seconds exactly, a cloud passed over the sun, and our craftsman adjusted his exposure time without conscious thought. His hands knew their work, just as Catherine's had known hers. They were all craftspeople in their way, creating meaning from materials, purpose from process, miracles from the mundane interaction of light and silver and time. The image, when developed, would show Madrid as it had never quite existed, too perfect, too still, caught between one state and another. Like all photographs, like all miracles, like all truths we tell ourselves to make existence bearable. Our daguerreotypist understood now that his role was not to capture reality, but to transform it, one careful chemical reaction at a time, into something that could sustain human hope. The workshop filled with the familiar scent of mercury vapor and fixing solution, the perfume of his peculiar art. Outside, the city was already returning to its everyday form, snow melting into memory. But here, in silver and shadow, the impossible winter afternoon would last forever, proof that some transformations, whether divine or merely chemical, could indeed transcend their humble origins.